Welcome back. So this is really the first episode where we start back on this thing that you guys get to see. So up to now, there's 5 years. I figured that out today. I looked at the date on the pictures from when we started this thing, and Meg's going to insert some of those pictures here. It's hard for me to think that this thing came from what you're going to see. But it's been 5 years, almost to the day. I started in October of 19. Reggie Moore was working for me, and you'll see him in some of the pictures. He was doing the grunt work and cleanup and taking it apart. It was a mess. But anyway, so we're back on it. You'll get to follow along this episode up to the point to where I saw the problem. I was really nervous about the Hydroboost and the brake steering noise problems, and I solved that in this episode, and I think you might like the way I did it. So come along, check it out, and thanks for watching. All right, I'm getting started here. I'm going to put a brand new master cylinder on. I remembered once we started putting fluid, Debbie started pumping, that I never finished this part out. I just had it up here for mock-up. So the way it works is the Hydroboost is supposed to be on this side of the firewall. Well, I didn't want that big ugly cast iron piece sticking out here. So I put it inside, and I had to make an adapter, and it mounts just like it would a firewall. There's actually a big nut on it, but it's got a bracket back inside. But by doing that, it spaces the Hydroboost back away from the master cylinder. It should bolt up directly to the Hydroboost. And if it did, this Willwood comes with a piston that goes in there for power brakes. If you're not power brakes, you use it this way. Well, unfortunately, I've got to add about 1/2 inch to this, make a new one, because I've got a 1/2 inch spacer that I put in here to move the booster away from the sheet metal. It had bumps that made me have to move it back a little bit. So we're gonna go back here to the lathe, make this same thing. It's got a cup on one end and a ball on the other. I need it to stick out just about a 1/2 inch further than what this one sticks out. Okay, so I guess I got back off of the lathe. I just took a piece of aluminum 1/2 inch bar stock and made this one, which there's the one that fits flush from Willwood. Here's mine that sticks out. I didn't even really get close or accurate with the measurements. I just guessed, which I do a lot. I put it up here. I press the brake pedal down. You can't see what I'm doing inside, but I get maybe a 1/2 inch of movement out of the brake pedal before it contacts the master cylinder, starts pushing it away from the firewall. So that just sits in there, same little dimple, same little bump, same taper, everything's the same, just sits in there, can't go anywhere. That's gonna go right there. I'm gonna bench bleed the master cylinder and then hook the lines up, and after we have lunch, Debbie can start pumping and I'll start bleeding brakes. So after a lengthy brake bleeding process, which I thought was the problem, and it turns out it really wasn't, I'm gonna back this thing out and let it run for a little while. It kind of stinks the shop up. I'm gonna let it sit out there. The power steering works and the brakes work now, but the fluid in the master cylinder, or in the power steering pump, is foamy. So I don't know if the pump's bad or if it's just got air in the lines. So I'm gonna let it run for a little while and see. But I moved it on its own, under its own power today, and did a little burnout back here. So it wants to do that. But I'm going to see how it does. Once I back it out and let it run, I may be replacing a pump. We went through 3 master cylinders and a brand new brake booster. It turns out I think the problem was mostly the Hydroboost. It was an old one that somebody gave me. I don't even know what it came off of other than a General Motors product. And it's the same as my 01 truck, except a couple small details which I was able to work around. They had one in town, put it on, and I've got brakes. I've got brakes that'll send you through the windshield if you were going very fast. So now instead of no brakes, I feel like I have too much brake, or at least too much power assist. So we're at the point of trying to figure all that out. I thought it was the brakes need bled. I tried pressure bleeding, I tried vacuuming them, I tried gravity bleeding them, pumping and bleeding them. We tried everything in the world and just couldn't make it work, and it just didn't seem like it was a bleeding issue. Then I just kind of determined that this is 1-ton wheel cylinders, and they're single piston 1 ton, which they used up to like 90 or 91. That piston is, geez, it must be 3.5 or 3 3/4. It's huge. I decided my 1-inch master cylinder might not be big enough to feed it. I took the brake lines off. I traced the brake lines. It was really a chore, but I decided it just probably wasn't big enough to feed those big calipers, because no matter how much we pumped it and bled it and did, I put a paint cup and put one of the wheel cylinder lines or wheel caliper lines into that paint cup, and Debbie would press the brakes and it would get some fluid, but not like I would expect, because when I bench bleed a master cylinder, it'll squirt a stream of fluid 20 feet. Well, it wasn't doing that. I slept on it last night, thought about it this morning, finally decided that it has to be the Hydroboost. So Debbie went to the parts store, picked up a new one, and it works now. I mean, it'll send you through the windshield. So I think the booster was bad. It was used, an old one off of a car that somebody took it off of. A friend of mine gave it to me with some other stuff. And I think that was it. Even if it wasn't it needed to be replaced because it was leaking some fluid inside, which would get on the carpet. And you know, I should have just put a new one on to start with. But basically that was a mock-up. So now I've got Debbie went to town last night and got a master cylinder for a 90 Chevy truck, 3500. Because I got to researching it, and a 1-ton uses an 1.25" master cylinder when they use a single piston caliper and drum brakes. So this has got a small reservoir, big reservoir, disc drum, and it's an 1.25" bore versus the 1-inch bore. I don't really like the way it looks, but I do like the fact that I can see the fluid through the plastic reservoir. And we figured out that anything like my truck, like an 2001, had 4-piston or 2-piston calipers. It uses a 1-300, and one of them uses a 1-4 something bore master cylinder. So I just concluded quickly that the master cylinder wasn't big enough, and I believe that to be true. That 1-inch master cylinder is not big enough for those gigantic calipers, and it might work, but it wouldn't be right. So we got an 1.25" master cylinder now, a new Hydroboost, and it does stop, and it reverse works, first gear works. I'm going to start it, back it outside, let it run, and just see if it'll bleed some air out of the pump. I don't want to do it in here. It just stinks too much. It is. I'm going to blame that on Iski because the cam has a lot of overlap, and it does kind of stink like raw gas. Let's see here. Right there on the front wheel. reason, after pulling it in, the front end's sitting up higher. You know what it is? I was gassing it when I was doing a little burnout, a little spin back here, not really a burnout, but it just occurred to me, that's why it's up. So it's extending the front end up. It's transferring weight. It's going to be a race car. So it did like this. Tried to do a pop-a wheelie. That's what it was. It was trying to do a pop-a wheelie. But anyway, the shocks are tight. The valving, I've got them set fairly tight. And it came up. Look, I think it's sitting there going back down. But it extended up, and the compression on the shock is fairly tight. So I don't like it. Looks Carolina squat. We got to do something about it. Okay, that's better. Now, back to business. Back to regularly scheduled programming. This thing's been just a pain in my side ever since we tried to start it the first time. Had a Terminator in it. Terminator X Plus Max Pro times 3 divided by 2 Terminator, the best one, because it has to run all this stuff. But it wouldn't run, no matter what any of us did. We all looked at it. I mean, Nick, Tom, Alex, me. Alex is calling tech. We couldn't make it run. It would crank it in, it would boom. It'd sound like somebody shot a shotgun in here. Never would start. Turns out that it just won't run on Terminator. I've got a dual sync distributor with 8 LS coils. It wouldn't run. Even though Holly said it would run, it would not run. They suggested I try a Dominator, and I just plugged it in because they plug in the same place. Boom, it fired right up. So that was a long battle. We fought that for probably 2 or 3 months because I didn't have much time to work on it, and I was so disappointed in it and tired of it. So it's got a Dominator now, and it turns out that's a good thing because, and I think I've already talked about this, but the dash, the Holly dash, the Pro dash, and then these gauges, what are these? These are Dakota Digital gauges. They're so nice. But I've got a Dakota Digital adapter box in here that uses all of the Holly data to run the gauges, and it works perfect. I mean, I don't have any extra sensors or wires. It's the analog gauges are running off of a converter box off of the Holly, but it uses a different CAN bus. It uses a what's the name of the gauges? I can't say it. Racepack CAN bus to run those gauges. To run the Holly dash, it has to have a Holly CAN bus. So you have to have 2 different ones. Well, a Dominator evidently is the only one that'll do 2 different CAN buses. A Terminator won't. So we got all that fixed, all lined out. So we finally got brakes on it. The steering works. It's not any too good. This power steering is not as loose or easy as I'd like it to be. So I think I'm going to change the valve and the pump. And I don't know exactly how to do that. I've got to research, try to get more pressure out of this pump. I think it's an LS power steering pump. But we're running the big Hydroboost and the power steering, the big power steering, not LS style. I think it's just not enough power steering pressure. So I'll research that. But the biggest problem is it just sounds like garbage when you're turning this wheel or hitting the brakes. But Tom's got more experience with Hydroboost. I can't say, I don't think I've ever done a Hydroboost before. So this is my first. Tom says, my buddy's was like this, mine was like this. He said, I had to drive my car probably a month before he could get all the noise out of it. And he said, it still makes a little bit of noise when certain conditions. So they've determined, and Max, the guy that he works with Tom, have determined that it's air. You can see the foam inside the reservoir. They said it's just really slow to get the air out of them. So I was worried there for a little while that I was going to have to put a different pump on it, but I think I'm going to leave it. I can get to it after the fenders and doors are put on, and I'm going to wait and see if it just clears itself up by turning it, steering it. I'm going to jack it up and steer it without the motor running. They said that's the procedure. See if that helps. But then while it's out there, we would hear a knock. Bang! It sounded like somebody hitting, I can't even think what, like the header tube, something pingy with a screwdriver. Ting! Just a real loud metallic ping. We all look at each other. What the heck was that? So the valve train in this thing's been very noisy since I first started. It's like, I can't understand that. It's a hydraulic cam, but it's got Johnson short travel lifters, and the cam sounds pretty aggressive. Nolan engineered this cam profile. I really like the way it sounds, but it was, my first thought is there's something wrong in the valve train, and it's all good stuff, really high dollar stuff. I decided maybe when I was trying to figure out the noise that I had backed the rocker arms off too much, and maybe the push rod's jumping out of the cup on the lifter. That's hard to imagine. Finally decided out here, we were messing with it, you probably saw that in the video, and I figured out that if I just gas it a few times quick, but not really rev the engine, just hit the TPS basically, just change the TPS, then it would ping, it would rattle. It was like, okay, so that sounds like a detonation ping. And that's exactly what it sounds like it's pinging detonation, which is a little bit scary. That can hurt a piston, but I don't think as slow as it's running and what have you. And it's a race piston, 2618 or whatever it is. I don't think that was happening, but it definitely sounds like a detonation ping. So I'm thinking that there's something funny going on in the tune. Right now it was very sluggish. When you gas it, it's like it wants to rev if you just free gas it, but when it was under power with the tires here, you could tell it was sluggish. The other thing we noticed out there is when it would ping, we were watching the tailpipes, you can see black smoke come out of them. So that's detonation. It's something in the tune is I don't know what it is. Got to look at the timing. I don't know, it's not TPS. I can make it do it by messing with the TPS, but sitting there idling, it shouldn't do that. But it's something to do with the timing table, I think. It's like it's jumping timing up or leaning fuel out real fast or something, and it knocks, pings, and then it runs okay. It sounds really good idling, but so we're working bugs out like that. And this one's been, we had an El Camino, a 60 El Camino. We called it the Hell Camino, and it earned that title because it's the only car out of all the cars that I built that just everything that could go wrong did go wrong. It blew a radiator hose off and scorched Debbie with hot water. It's just like it was possessed. I really believe that. I think somebody died in that car or got murdered in it, and it was just an awful car. I was really glad to get rid of it. This is almost going to be Hell Camino 2 here. It's being really temperamental. But by the same token, this one's got more technology and more stuff going on in it than just about anything I've ever done. So I guess I got to be patient and work this out, but it's just been problem after problem. Most of the stuff works, but these brakes, getting the engine to run, and now this grinding steering is just making me pull my hair out. But I think we're almost there. Get that steering problem fixed. I'm going to do a couple little things. I'm going to do a modification on my steering coupler here where I don't have to search for the holes to line up there. They'll only go one way. I put them off center so you can't turn it backwards and misalign the steering wheel. But I'm going to cut a flat in it and weld a plate on it and then cut a flat in here. So when it's pushed together, the bolt holes are going to line up. I won't have to sit out here and search for it because right now I have to turn it until I get a bolt to line up. It's not a big deal, but I want to make it better before I hang all this sheet metal. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do a couple other things and start hanging fenders first, I believe, and then doors, and then hood, and then grill, and there's not a front bumper. So it'll probably be a PRI without a bumper because I really don't like the looks of a bumper. I may have to make some kind of a pan to fill the void down here where the bumper's supposed to cover, but we'll see. Anyway, it did move on its own power. It did stop. It does turn. It just makes noise right now. So we're slowly checking things off the list, and then I've got to deal with air conditioning, getting that charged. The fans work. The thing sits there and idles at 50 some odd pounds of oil pressure. The temperature stays perfect with that big radiator. The gas gauge works. The temperature gauge works. Everything works. The TAC, those Dakota digital gauges are just so cool, and they all work off of the Holley, so I don't have to have a sensor on the motor for them. So I'm going to get to work on this first, and I'll show you the process I'm going to do on that, and then I'll move on to doors and fenders. So I'm getting ready to work on the power steering noise, and that's going to be, we've determined that it needs bleeding, and I'm going to rig up something, and you can watch what I'm doing, and it may or may not work, but I'm going to hook my air conditioner vacuum pump up to the power steering pump and try to suck the air out of it. Something else I did last night, I was going to video this, and we got busy with somebody here, but I took these two couplers that I made off, and I machined one side of it, a flat into it. And the reason is just so when I pick this up, I don't have to search for the right place for the bolts to fit. So it's got a flat spot on it now, and I welded a cap across the top of it. So whenever I go to hook this up, it's easy to locate. With it being like that, I can just put the bolts in. I don't have to play any guessing games. So I did that last night, but we're gonna make an adapter here. I just cut a fitting off an old truck that I had out back to hook my air conditioner R134 gauges to. So let's cut that up. And I'll show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to I went out there with a saw and cut this off an old truck. I'm going to use this part here that the gauge snap or the hose snaps onto. I'm going to weld it to I'll cut a round plate and put a rubber gasket. And when I put the vacuum pump on it, I think it'll just suck down to the reservoir. We'll see if it works. Let's cut this off first. Idea is if I just have a round plate our dogs think somebody's here. I'm gonna bead blast that just so I can get it cleaned up a little bit. Let me turn the air compressor on. First thing in the morning, I haven't turned the air compressor on yet. Go over here and knock some of the corrosion from the last 25 years off of this, but I gotta weld it. I'm gonna cover the holes with my fingers, top and bottom. I just want to clean up the part that I'm gonna weld. That was easy. Okay. So that'll weld nice now. We're going to set that on a round washer kind of a thing. Let's raise the cab on the truck. Take the power steering cap off. Get an idea of the diameter of a washer that I need to cut. So the power steering pump is over here. Let's move the light around. It is kind of hard to get to. I think the guy that built this thing would have done a little better job. And that's something else that I noticed. It's under pressure. So I read about that this morning when I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm thinking about this stuff. And people talked about pressure. My idea was that it probably needs a vent. Because if there's air in the system and you're trying to get that air out, where's it going to go? This isn't vented. It's very, I mean, I guess it's got it's got some kind of a check valve deal. It may allow suction but not expansion. I'm not real sure, but if there's air in the system and you're trying to get it out, it's not going to go out if it's pressurized. But we'll deal with that later. I think, and I read pros and cons. I read where you want it to have some pressure, that there's something designed into it that you want, like, I don't forget what they said, maybe 6 pounds of pressure in the reservoir. Well, it probably had that. Seems to me like you'd want no pressure. So I thought about putting a vent in the cap, but I'm not going to yet. I think the idea for me right now is to get the air out of the lines and the Hydroboost and the steering gear and the pump, and then put the cap on, and if it builds pressure, we'll see how that works. If that doesn't work, we might go ahead and do a vent in the cap or run it without the cap and see how that works. What I'm gonna do right now though is just build something to suck this out. There goes my glasses. So let me get a tape measure and get an idea of what that diameter is. I'm just going to take a piece of 1/8 inch aluminum plate, cut a washer. I say that's probably an inch and a half. Yeah, inch and a half will do. So I'll make an 1 3/4 washer. And I think they make these adapters based on what Tom's employee down there says. He's been to school more recently than me, but I don't want to go to the parts store to buy an adapter. Well, who wants to do that? And I doubt that it would be for an air conditioner pump. It would be for a Mighty Vac hand type pump. And my theory is if a little bit is good, more's got to be better. So I'd rather put a vacuum pump on it and let it run than I had to hand pump the thing for 10 minutes. So let's go over to the other saw. I need an 1.5 inch circle. No, 1 3/4 circle. Let's find something 1 3/4. Ta-da! Look at that. You ask and you shall receive. 1 3/4. Don't let that camera be out of focus.
I just focused it.
You'll be in trouble. Somebody complained about her camera going in and out of focus. We apologize for such rudeness. I hate to ruin your viewing experience with a camera going in and out of focus. All right, so this is one of my favorite tools in the shop. I can't function without bandsaws, and obviously this one's used a lot. But you know what? I walked over here and I picked up this piece of plate off of the floor. There's stuff from casting, there's aluminum scraps of all sorts. I just use this saw for aluminum. This has got a wood and aluminum. I don't cut much wood, but if I do, this is a saw I use. The other one over there is much finer teeth, and it works great for steel. So my thought is I'm going to weld this to that circle with a hole in it, and I'm going to make a rubber gasket, and when I put the vacuum to it, it's going to suck down and seal. There's why I like bandsaws. Look at that. Perfect 1 3/4 circle. I'll go in there and sand it just a little bit, drill it, weld it, and it just makes life easy. And that piece of scrap, rather than throw it away, it can just lay here because I'll probably need something that size after a while. That's a piece of 1/4 by 1. Yeah, that's a valuable piece. I can make something out of that. That's like 14 gauge. There's 1/2 by whatever that is, 5. So it looks like scrap sitting around here, and it is, but it's good stuff. So while I'm sanding this washer up, I'm going to turn the welder on and let it be warming up and getting acclimated to the day's job, because it takes it a minute to fire up. Let's sand this washer and drill a hole in it. The shop is such a clutter right now. Too many projects going on. This is probably my second or third favorite tool, and probably one that gets used more than anything else in the shop. I got different grit belts that I can take seconds to change them. Okay, so that's good enough. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's not a piano, as my dad would say. I'm going to hit it with just a little bit of Scotch-Brite so it's clean and ready to weld up. When you're welding aluminum, that black ink right there will make it tough. It does. That's polluting. Aluminum's got to be clean. It doesn't like any contamination. I actually just used a little metal treat acid on it. So that's a nice clean piece. I'm going to spray a little acid on this because the glass beads will actually embed into the aluminum and create contamination. I'm not out for a pretty weld because this is a one-time use piece, but it's frustrating when a weld doesn't work right. So there we go, 2 clean pieces. Just blow them off, drill a hole, and then we got to make a rubber gasket out of something. I think I have a piece of rubber. I'll show you this. Yeah, dirty bandsaws bug me. I'll come back and get that in a little bit. I think I remember a piece of flat rubber strap laying over here. Oh, I don't see it. I wonder what's in there. Pistons. Look at that. I don't remember what pistons those are. Those were Bill Miller bought. They could have been BMEs. There we go. I used to have a bottom for that box, but Alex ended up using it. So just a piece of rubber. We'll see if that'll work. I'll just cut that with some snips. Let's just get an idea of center here. I'm just going to take and draw around with the fingers. It doesn't have to be exact. Close enough, and then I'm going to put a dot right there in the center of that because I can visualize that. Hammer it. And I like hammers laying everywhere, and there's never enough hammers. That's not the one I would choose, but it works. You'll notice that, yes, my drill press stays covered up. I can clean this thing and I get busy with a job and it gets dirty again really quick, and I don't have time to stop because I'd rather be building than cleaning. bits laying here that are the most common that I would use, instead of having to go to the bit box every few minutes and get a bit. Most of the ones I use are right there. Deburr that hole. Okay, now grab a can of, there's always brake clean or carburetor clean laying around, so I want to, ink be gone. That should be called ink be gone. All right, so there, we're going to weld that together. But first, I think I'll get some snips and we'll put a washer. See, a piece of wood laying around is now a tool. It's not just a piece of scrap. Kind of line those holes up a little bit. Okay. Mike Bell sent me a video this morning of somebody starting to throw something away, and it's getting ready to leave his hand and go in the trash can. He stopped and looked at it, put it on the shelf. I guess he knows me. All right, so the theory is, now we'll see if it works, but that's rubber that'll be welded together. Put a vacuum hose on it, and it's going to suck itself down to the top of that reservoir. Whether it works or not, we'll see. My fear is that we'll implode the reservoir. So I've got a plan for that as well. Since I can't see that, I just gotta kind of guess. That don't work, I'll just guess. Okay, it's a little bit off center, I don't care. You guys don't care, I don't care. You know what? I'll probably just smoke. It doesn't have to have a Schrader valve though. I probably just burned the Schrader valve in there up. But honestly, and I got off a little on the center, but it's still fine. I'm going to take that Schrader valve out just because I don't want that rubber burning. They can see where I've got tools there, and even in the 55. So Alex got a new pair of boots the other day after our little cruise over to the other town. For the car show, and she come back, and I guess they're MIA brand, but she thought we need to make this. This is part of her box. It even came with the notch, so she thinks we should put a scoop on there. I'm kidding. That was her joke. I need to take it down because it almost makes me sick to look at. So this was in the 55. I like this one because it's a long screwdriver style. It'll reach down in that Schrader valve, or in that fitting. I think it will. Let's go back here in the light where I can see. Yeah, I just haven't unscrewed it far enough yet. I think that's the issue. It doesn't want to come out. heck? I'll make sure I'm turning it. It's turning. So I need something to push it out the back side, it looks like. Grab this and see if I can shove this trailer valve out the back side as I'm screwing it out the front side. No comprende. It's probably melted in there, the rubber part of it, and jamming it. Let's see, that's what happened because there's no rubber left on it. So now a Schrader valveless, I'm going to clean that up in there a little bit, and I'll put another one in out of another fitting. But that one there is toast. I burned it up. So let's go back and finish welding it. I'm not sure it has to have a Schrader valve, because I don't need to retain the vacuum. The pump's going to be running. It's just a matter of if the hose itself has to have a Schrader valve to activate the depress to make it actually pull air through it. I'm gonna clean this because it's got some slimy. It's like a steering wheel in a car. It's kind of turning into slime. There we go. So if that will seal, we got the old truck part welded to a flat washer and a rubber gasket made, and hopefully it sucks down. Let's get our vacuum pump out and a set of hoses and gauges. This is the low pressure side. So that snaps on there. Is there a Schrader in there that's got to be depressed? I think this end has a little anvil that depresses the Schrader valve, so I don't even think I have to have one. I think that'll just go on there. Okay. We have suction. So I guess I have to do this. It's a lid. This little eyebrow I can see. There goes vacuum. Hopefully you don't blow a pump on it. I'm going to make just a little bit of a leak here. What I'm trying to do, and it's probably too late now. Okay. I'm letting it leak a little atmosphere from the high pressure side, just because I don't want to have full vacuum. But that's sucking. As soon as I hook that up, okay, so we're drawing right now 26 inches of vacuum instead of 30. I don't know that that would actually make a difference in the thing blowing out. That's a pretty stout reservoir. As I did, I pulled that out. I can see lots of air bubbles. I think this is working. I gotta put it back together. It's kind of hard to get to. So instead of doing a hand pump, I think I'm going to go ahead and shut this valve and let it draw a little bit more. That's like 28 inches of vacuum, which is probably about as much as it's going to do. I'm just going to shut it. Hopefully it doesn't suck the tank in. So we were talking yesterday, Tom and Max and myself, that we could, and I guess they do this, they teach them this in school now, you can put a mighty back on it where you hand pump it. Yeah, that's almost 30 inches of vacuum. And sit there and suck the air out of it for a while. I turbocharged it, so now it's got an electric vacuum pump. Hopefully it's pulling all the air from the Hydroboost through the lines, through the steering gear, which the Hydroboost is actually mounted right. Tom was talking about one of his friends turned it upside down so the lines would come out the bottom, it looks better. He said he had a lot of trouble getting the air out of it. Mine's actually mounted right under the dash, and hopefully the hoses are big enough, but the steering gear is definitely turned up. Instead of laying back at an angle, it's turned straight up. So, who knows, air could be trapped in there, could be in the pump, but if there's air in there, this should be pulling it out, just like an air conditioner system. So we'll let this run for a little while, and then I'll come back and probably start it and see if it made any difference. If that doesn't make a difference, I may have some other issue going on that's causing the noise, maybe a pump, maybe a restriction. I may put two return lines, one from the steering gear, or let's see how they work, one from the steering gear and one from the Hydroboost. So I've got them wide together going into the one return line on the pump, and it's only got about that much of single line, but it would be easy for me to take it and put a second line. I think there's all kinds of conflicting information out there. Some say that that's fine, some say a T's fine, I've got a Y, and some say that you absolutely have to have two returns. But we'll find out. So we'll come back here in a little bit after this sucks down. We've been vacuuming probably maybe 10 minutes. So what I'm going to do is sit down 29 inches of vacuum. I'm going to shut this thing down, the vacuum pump. This seems to work really good. I thought it was going to be a one-time deal for me, but I'm keeping that around. As soon as I attached the vacuum to the reservoir, I could feel it bubbling. I could feel it through the reservoir. It was bubble. And when I took it off, just a little bit ago, the fluid was pretty clear instead of milky looking. So it definitely pulled some air out of the system. We'll see if it fixes my noise issue. I can't guarantee that. We're going to start it up in a minute. But I think that's a good thing to do for any hydraulic steering, and especially if you're using Hydroboost brakes, but evidently it's a common issue. But let's shut it down and let the cap down. Down on the side here. Let's see what it looks like. The fluid is low. That's odd. It was up pretty high. I'm not even sure I see fluid. I think that's the reservoir that I'm seeing. That's the plastic. I couldn't have sucked the fluid out of it, so that's something to consider. What's going on with that? The pump was actually too full of fluid. You know what I think happened? I think there was such a big bubble, so much air in that Hydroboost that we've now drawn the fluid into the lines in the Hydroboost, and it's not in the reservoir. So I need to top the reservoir off. That's very interesting. I mean, it didn't suck out. One of my concerns was it might suck up into my vacuum pump, but there's no place for it to go. It would exhaust out of the vacuum pump. That didn't happen, but it definitely lowered the fluid level. I mean, to like non-existent. I can't see any fluid in there. So the only place that it could go would be in the Hydroboost. What I may do is put some more fluid in it, run the vacuum pump just another minute or so, because I don't know if maybe all the fluid, that's a small reservoir. That's one of the other concerns. Some people say that you need a bigger reservoir for, and this is a big 1-ton steering box and a 1-ton Hydroboost, so evidently there's a lot of fluid capacity. That makes me feel good though. I'm thinking as I'm talking here, I think we just filled those two up, but I think it used all the fluid in the reservoir. So I'm gonna put some more in it, vacuum it one more time, because if it's empty, it's still got air in the system. So let me grab some fluid in a funnel, and then we'll come right back. Gonna be nice having the weight in the cab. We get the interior in it and the doors on it. It'll go down by itself. It goes down once you break it over, but it takes a foot or so of it to get heavy enough to go down by itself. What I did was I added fluid back to it. I vacuumed it one more time. I'm gonna hook the steering up. It doesn't make noise until you actually steer it or press the brake pedal. And it's not as bad with the brake pedal. So let's put the steering on. And start it. I want to open the doors because it gets the shop stinky, but they're mowing the grass with one of those 0-turn lawnmowers, and it's louder than a jet. So I can't open the door. So that's hooked back up. Put it in park, start it, and see if we have noise. That's a win. So I'm not one to do something and tell you this is the way to do it. There's my opinion. Typically I'll tell you that. Now I'm telling you that's the way to do it. You can get a cheap vacuum pump at Harbor Freight. I know they have them. That's a snap-on that I've had for years. Rig up a rubber cap and just let it suck to the pump. When the other car that we've got that's off being wrapped, we're doing a project with it, I put a QA1 setup in the front of it, and it's got a Mustang rack, and it was noisy. So as soon as it gets back here, I'm putting the vacuum pump on it. That fixed that problem. That thing sounded like garbage yesterday, and we're fixed. So there's a good tip, and I didn't know it. We just figured that out together. So we're fixed. All right, thanks for watching. That was a little bit of a touchy episode for me because I was really concerned about this Hydroboost problem, and it turned out to be not much. But if it was a problem, you know, converting it back to manual brakes was an option, and I really considered that. Some bigger lines was an option, but I really didn't want to do that because they're routed through all of this tilt cab stuff. So it was a little bit nerve-wracking. I was actually falling out of love with it again, which is real easy. This has been a love-hate relationship. Right now I'm loving it. During this episode I wasn't so sure. So anyway, thanks for watching. Be sure if you're at the PRI show in December to check it out in the ISKI booth 3913. So I think it'll be there. Fingers crossed. Got to build the bed. I've got some really cool ideas for the bed coming up. But thanks for watching. We'll see you at PRI show or in the next episode, or both hopefully.